Hello, everybody, and welcome to our fourth and final module of the CompTIA PenTest Plus short course with Jeremy Costa as our mentor. This module will focus on post-exploitation and reporting. My name is Jack Stewart. I'll be emceeing and kind of facilitating a little bit for the evening. As I mentioned, we have Jeremy Costa, who is a veteran IT Masters mentor in short courses and full-length courses. Has written a number of our full-length courses and short courses, and is an all-around cybersecurity superstar. I don't think it's unfair to say. We also have Lily Nguyen in the back end, making sure everything runs smoothly for us on the Zoom. Like I said, welcome. This is the fourth and final module in the PenTest Plus short course. As we mentioned previously last week, this course does help you study towards the PenTest Plus certification. And if you're an Australian resident, you are able to gain a discount on that CompTIA certification via the IT Masters website. If you navigate to IT Masters and then click store, you can find more details on that. Because this is the final module, we'll let you know in advance that the assessment, the exam will be uploaded within 24 hours of finishing this webinar. Each participant will have one attempt, 60 minutes per email account. The exam consists of 20 multi-choice questions as well as a VMware practical element as well. The minimum pass mark is 50%. That will be able to be found, like all of your course materials, learnings, reporting, etc., at learn.itmasters.edu.au. You can also find our recordings on our YouTube channel. Just search IT Masters CSU on our YouTube. And just a short bit of housekeeping before we begin. As always, we will be using the chat function and the Q&A function for today's webinar. Please keep the Q&A function for topic-related, subject-related questions that you have for Jeremy about the subject matter of the short course. The chat is for chatting with your fellow participants as well as Jeremy, or asking questions more related to IT Masters. Both Lily and I will be available to answer some questions in the chat function as well. We'll have time for questions relating to both the course material as well as the exam and things of that nature towards the end. And before we start the proceedings properly tonight, we would also like to acknowledge that we're coming to you from the sovereign lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, as well as the Gadigal people, whose sovereignty has never been ceded, and pay respects to their elders and ancestors, on whose land we are broadcasting to you from tonight. So with all that said and done, we've talked about the chat, about the Q&A. This will be our final module. I'll pass you over to Jeremy Costa. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jack. Wonderful to be here on the fourth week and then the last week. Thank you for everyone for joining this live session this tonight. And I'm just a little bit flustered because I haven't been called a cyber superstar for a while. I think maybe a couple of years ago, but not. Yeah, certainly a title that is not bandied around very, very frequently. But thanks for that, Jack. On this week, we're wrapping up kind of what the attackers do when they get into the network, that post-exploitation, the lateral movement, the persistence, and the cleanup. And then finally, we'll be covering the reporting, which is what someone pays for when they're doing a penetration test. Obviously, they pay for the technical expertise of someone to try and break into their environment and show them where the weaknesses are. But until you can put that into a report, present it in a way that articulates risk to the audience, then it's not a very useful exercise. So that reporting part is actually a crucial part of the whole penetration testing exercise. So let's dive into it, and we'll see where it takes us. So when you're in, so it's like that a bit when you are attacking from the outside. You are hitting your head against a brick wall. You make a little bit of gain in, and then you land on a system within the environment you're trying to attack, and you are within the confines of that system. What do you do with it then? What does the attacker particularly do with it? Well, the attacker will try and get broader access. They'll try and see if there's third-party connections, there's partnerships that they can make use of, all of the systems around, getting at the lay of the land, identifying the key applications, the databases. They'll try and exfiltrate data. They'll cause some internal disruption, which can range all the way from being kind of pest, sort of nuisance stuff to, a full-fledged ransomware attack and load. They might gather user behavior for future use, or they might even taunt or tease internal staff. You don't see that very often when someone, an actual attacker gets into an environment. Typically, they will run whatever they need as quick as they can to monetize what they want to get access to, and work out those crown jewels. And the final thing is they might maintain persistence. So when we're talking about the pen tester, they've got to try and think in the mindset of the attacker when they land in the environment. They have to see what else, and maybe that's all the pen test scope is, just to get in the environment and then show how that can be done. But maybe it's a bit bigger. Maybe it's a full attack path simulation where you're breaking into an environment, moving to the next stage, and then finding all the applications and about to pull the trigger on some disruption. And then you stop and say, look, this is how far we got in. Usually when a penetration test is that successful and they're able to get in, you kind of have to stop and say, hey, customer who I'm pen testing with their network, you really need to fix up some of these things, because if I can make use of it, someone else can make use of it. So go back and fix things up. But then, the way the attackers work is often it's a bit commoditized. So there might be access brokers who are selling access into certain networks. So maybe they want to maintain persistence. They want to go low and slow. They want to understand what protections there are in the network. Are they running endpoint detection response? Do they have a particular vendor of anti-malware, or do they have some sort of VPN you can make use of? So they'll map out a bit about what the environment is like, so they can actually take that to the dark web, sell it. A cyber criminal or a ransomware gang picks that up, comes in and makes use of it, or maybe a nation state actor comes in and makes use of it as well. So as the pen tester, you've got to think about these scenarios, because if you can write them in the pen test report as a bit of an attack scenario that makes sense and impacts the organization assets, it's a lot more compelling. And that's a bit of a theme through all of this pen testing, is not just the technical skills to do what an attacker can do, but also the understanding of the business to be able to articulate why they need to fix up, right? Why they need to change things, why they need to remediate, what they need to fix as a priority, so they don't become a victim to an attacker. Because if the pen tester finds it and is able to provide it to the customer before a bad guy can make use of it, or a bad actor can make use of it, then that is success for the pen test activity. And that really should be celebrated. If we found stuff, we fix it up, we harden the environment, we're now not vulnerable, and we can tell that no one else has made use of that vulnerability. So that's really the goal of what we're trying to do. Now, I love this, and I chose this picture here for maintaining persistence, not because it's a cute cat. I don't have a cat myself, but just because of the link to Netcat, and that's a bit of a bad a bad cyber joke, if you will. But maintaining persistence is often about keeping a port open so someone else can come in. So I thought this was a good Netcat. Maintaining persistence, you can do it a number of ways. With Windows, you've got task scheduler. You can run a routine that will keep the backdoor open. task scheduler to run netcat on a Windows box will keep a port open. Netcat is that Swiss Army knife, being able to transfer data and files from one device to the other. It allows you to shoot that device, information from your attacking machine to the target machine and back, and the other way as well, and open up reverse shells and things like that. So task scheduler can be used to create a netcat service that will be open as a backdoor. You might also run a Python script on the task scheduler. You can do similar things with Linux through setting a job through the cron command. It's like Chronicle. You can schedule the frequency of how often a job runs. You might create a service of your own. So if you've got Python or Bash on the system, you can open up a service port or a network resource and actually open that up and make that a backdoor as well. Or you can just use a backdoor utility, or you can add something to the startup folder. So I remember back in the days of Windows XP when it was kind of fairly new, and a lot of viruses were bouncing around through USB, through BitTorrent, things like that. And often when a machine got infected, the antivirus will clean up all the files, and then when you reboot, it'd get all infected again. And often they were in the registry startup key, the HKey local machine key, and that would initiate that again, and then you'd clean that out, and then you restart, and the malware would start again when you restart it again, and you'd find out that actually put it into the start menu startup folder as just a basic way to get things to start up when they're back in, when the system starts up again. So there's all this way to be yes, Ben, I've got a little bit of PTSD. I did this so much in my youth, I guess. I feel like I should still be in my youth, but I'm not. And I used to know all of the XP process names pretty much off by heart. You could look through the list and go, oh, that one's not right, and find it. So yeah, Ben, it actually hits my PTSD a bit as well. And then we can do these reverse shells. We can use the interpreter as well if we're breaking in that way as a reverse shell. We can set up VNC to have a way to remote control the device. And you've got to think about if you're an attacker and you're trying to simulate that as a pen tester, think about how obvious that will be to someone who is running that system. Is there going to be something that will trip it up, like we've been talking about, trying to avoid security tools? But those ways to get back in and to get the persistence and control the system as you are attacking it is sometimes crucial to show a customer, look, if someone gets in, they can just put this little bit like a web shell on, or they can create an account and be able to access the system again. If you have a Unix system that is open to the internet on SSH and you are relying on your accounts to keep that safe, that is a thin layer of protection. You might have MFA, but you have those. The username and password is used to access from the internet. If you're the attacker and you are on the service, and you have admin credentials or root credentials, then you're able to create users. So even if they reset kind of the account that you might have compromised in the first place, because you've created another user, you can come in still as that, and they would have to understand what a normal user looks like. So a lot of the times when you're a defender in an environment, you do actually want those user management tasks to come up on the dashboard or be alerted to them, that new user creation on systems that you wouldn't expect new users to turn up in. So that's always a good one to look out for. So you can create accounts, you can get, and there's this path of credential collection. So when pen testers get onto an environment, sometimes the first thing they do is they try and find all the shares on the network that have loose privileges, and they look for files with the word password in them. And we've talked a little bit about this previously, but it is a very effective way to find credentials for the rest of the network as well, particularly on the device that that is being targeted from a pen test as well when you get onto it. You might use malware as well, so a keylogger or some other credential info stealer, or maybe a browser extension. And then also to enumerate. So if you manage to get an AD account, then enumerating all of that helps you maintain that persistence as well. All right, now calling back out. So when you're in, you may not have a pathway back in. You've got a very tenuous pathway. So maybe you found a vulnerable website and you were able to bounce through that into maybe a database system, and maybe that data, that website doesn't have good, maybe it's rebooted every night or doesn't have good persistence, and you only have session access, but you actually want to be able to provide some constant session re-access, right? So you don't want to lose that. So you might call back out with a command and control framework. So there are some out there, and I would say that using something this heavy as a pen tester, you would expect it to get picked out. We know Empire, Covenant, and Mythic are some good frameworks for doing that, to call back out and to control a device. But it would be kind of heavy, but it is something to try. If you are able to get into a server and load up these frameworks to actually have that control through a command and control framework, which is quite significant, then that is going to be something that will headline in your report to say, look, I was able to run these fully fledged malicious frameworks to keep control of your systems that should have been caught. And this is why sometimes it's a good idea. We don't think Unix systems really are impacted by viruses, and they're not really to as much degree as Windows systems are. But if you are not looking out for malicious files that are landing on these devices, it may not be because they're infected. It may just be because they are hacking tools that you want to know about. So it is still important to have some sort of security tool look at the devices and the files on your Unix systems, particularly if they're internet facing. The other one is web shells. Web shells are really very popular for a long time. There was one called China Chopper and a few others that got a lot of notoriety over the last, I would say, 8 years. Websites were still quite vulnerable. A lot of people wrote their own websites. Now there seems to be a lot more SaaS for websites, a lot more professional websites, rather than just kind of bake your own stuff, and a bit better kind of, things like, I don't want to say that WordPress is getting better, but I think it probably can still be used in a secure way, but you do have to maintain it quite a bit. But there seem to be a lot of web shells around, and it seemed to be the primary way for attackers to get into environments through the perimeter. And I think these days, when you get a web shell onto something, you're most likely getting a web shell into a cloud environment that doesn't put you in the corporate environment anyway. So I think that's kind of losing a bit of favor. Where we do get kind of that, that interface in is often through edge devices like we've been talking about. The Trojan horse, this is a bit of an old term in the cybersecurity industry. A Trojan horse is just an application that professes to be something else or has malwaring bundled into it. We do see this through some packages that are, hung out like bait for people to download, like some, maybe a VLC has, if you don't get it from the legitimate place, someone's bundled in a virus with it. If you get a software cracker to put a license into a bit of software to get it for free, sometimes those things have malware bundled in it with it. So there's a bit of a Trojan horse element about that. Not so much for calling back out and for facilitating access back into an environment, but it is still something to consider, that you might be able to trick someone as a pen tester to download something that would do that call out. and that could be a method for utilizing that Trojan horse to perform the pen test and show some technique there. Now, if you are roaming around a network and you are the attacker, you want to leave some stuff behind, you want it to be quite kind of untoward, under the radar. I like this picture here of a tree root going around a rock and it kind of hanging around some structure. It's kind of like how a rootkit is working with a kernel. It's sitting underneath, behind the scenes, trying to stay low, trying to be that kind of sleeper that can be woken up at any time and used. Rootkits were quite diabolical for a while there. I think these days in modern kind of pen testing, you just kind of need to establish that a rootkit can be used on a device to say that's a recommendation that you look out for these rootkits and don't allow them to come into your device, very much like the kind of the anti-malware argument. The other thing you might leave behind if you're a pen tester is browser extensions. If you're getting into people's workstations and they are loading up documents that you are sending to them, then you can try and put in some browser extensions, and the whole kind of application space is mostly moving to browsers. We don't really have thick clients anymore. It's all just in a web browser. All of our kind of cloud administration, all of our email, all of our calendar, and even when it is in a thick client, usually it's just a representation of the browsing interface. Even Teams is very much a browser-based, and similar to other messaging apps and things like that. So when you get into the browser with the browser extension, then you can do all sorts of things like stealing sessions. You can steal credentials. You can scrape. You can grab even banking credentials and usage, it's all sorts of diabolical things can happen in browser extensions. So that is a good one for a pen tester to try if they are able to compromise workstations, and they can show that if you can put those browser extensions in, then you can start collecting credentials and use them elsewhere. Now, as the pen tester, you also want to figure out if you can get this stuff in. So if you try and load up a browser extension that is known to be malicious, then it's most likely that you're not going to be able to proceed. So it's important that you have a good understanding of what the security tools are, and actually being able to turn off anti-malware is something that is not impossible. Certainly if you've got full permissions, if you've got admin rights over the device, then you'll most likely be able to turn off services. I know some anti-malware has watchdog services, but essentially if you have admin rights, then it's just a matter of figuring out which services you've got to turn off first. You can kind of blow things away. You can do all sorts of things with admin rights. Turning off some of the sophisticated EDR software, the endpoint detection response, can be difficult, but really as a pen testing capability or a pen testing specialist, you want to know how to turn those things off and where the weaknesses are for those tools as well. And if you're able to do that, and something that the kind of the CrowdStrike incident last July taught us was that it's actually not too hard to get into safe mode and bypass a lot of these security controls as well. So if you are, if you can get back into safe mode with networking and still be able to access the box over the network, you might be able to get all this security software off and be able to use that as a launch pad for performing more lateral movement with the tools that you want to use. So there's a whole lot of possibilities there for turning that stuff off. Yeah, Colin, you're right. It should be just caught my eye there. It should definitely be a red flag. That is something that a SOC should be looking at. It should be something that it actually is alerting, but you'd be surprised how many times these alerts make it into security consoles, but then don't get looked at. So the whole incident response, the whole monitoring and alerting capability in the Security Operations Center capability does need to be tuned and maintained as well to make sure that these things are picked up. And then finally, endpoint firewalls. Endpoint firewalls can be a problem for the pen tester, because to start attacking a device from another device from a corporate network, you really need to be able to talk to the services. So endpoint firewalls are pretty problematic. If you had an endpoint firewall on a device and you only had the RPC, like the remote management and a few things open, then you might be able to perform a remote command, particularly if you have admin rights over that device by then, to actually turn off the firewall so that you can access all the other services. So that's a possibility as well. Being able to do that, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go on, but you can do that with some of the Windows instrumentation, or with SCCM, or with if you own their cloud through Intune possibly as well. So that's all of certainly a possibility for tampering with this software. All right, so once you've done all this and you've landed somewhere and you're starting to collect these devices, we've been talking about the race to domain admin, and I just bring it up again quickly, that all of these devices that you find in an enterprise are stepping stones to the next device, and the idea is to get as many credentials as possible. If the pen tester manages to penetrate the external defenses, get into the network and move through into a privileged position, that is a complete ownership and something that the organization is likely to take notice of, and give the opportunity for the pen tester really to provide some guidance on how to fix those things up. But as you're doing it as a pen tester, you're collecting these things, you're exploring the network, you're gaining that additional access you need to be able to prove that the system isn't as secure as they think it is. You also get the ability to escalate privileges. So when you're moving from one device to the next, certainly in Windows devices, and you're using utilities like Mimikatz, or you are trying to grab credentials from sessions, you'll find that some computers will have more sessions than others. Maybe there's a computer out there that's recently had a service desk analyst logged into it, but they didn't log out properly via RDP, and then you can pop that password from that device if you've got access to it. So this is all part of that escalation of privilege. You're trying to find those avenues to get right into the middle of the network, and that's the key for that, moving laterally. There's this concept in the CompTIA Pentesting Plus, where they sort of differentiate between lateral movement and horizontal movement, or horizontal movement and privilege escalation. Horizontal movement might be considered kind of moving around at the same permission level, but with kind of different access, not increased access, but just different access to different shares. So you're sort of moving horizontally rather than kind of straight up into the domain admin. But yeah, I think that any sort of lateral movement is useful for the pen tester, because they can show how many workstations and laptops are able to compromise, how many servers, how many domain controls, how many Unix boxes. So understanding all of that and being able to own the network is really a part of the core kind of pen testing capability. Just some more techniques. So being able to pivot is great. Finding a launch pad. I know some attacks that resulted, some real life attacks that resulted in the attackers running up VMware hosts, both the Windows host and a Linux host, and being able to bring their tools onto their own boxes because they owned the virtual machine environment. So being able to own the VMware environment, run up your own virtual machines, being able to run up a Kali box in there as an attacker is just a huge foothold into the environment, particularly if you've got access to all the enterprise networks through that VMware host. And then if you've got that kind of owned the VMware host, then you can hop to the other VMware hosts as well in the management plane. So that's a great pivot technique and part of the kind of ownership. But that did happen in real life in some environments. I've seen that. I've also seen relay creation. So someone setting up a proxy, or a proxy becoming compromised and being used for not only out kind of inside to out kind of communication, but also outside to in. If anyone's looked at the Vault Typhoon stuff, they use some NetSH proxying utilities to bounce around network zones. Really good techniques in there for doing that. Looking out for those things in your own kind of SIEM, in your EDR and into your security operations center is important. Being able to collect those techniques so that, you know, those techniques that aren't very common but are utilized by the attackers and aren't used by legitimate people. But that kind of relay creation, that proxying is a key part of it. Then service discovery as well. So when you're in the network, you are trying to pivot and attack other services. So you'll be looking for RDP Citrix, that remote access stuff, VNC as well, even TeamViewer accounts, TeamViewer agents are good to find as well. LDAP for siphoning out directories of user details. Databases, this is what it's all about. An application is valuable to an organization because of not just the function it serves, but also the data that is within the application. So you're looking for those crown jewels, and usually they're databases, depending on the organization, of course. If you're talking about a telco, there's a couple of major crown jewels repositories, like the customer database is enormously sensitive. Getting, you know, millions of customers' data is one of those massive treasure troves of data, but also getting back into the environment that is running the telecommunications equipment, the mobile phone equipment, or the ISP equipment. All of that they are big, running on databases and applications as well. It's all similar technology, but they're the services you're looking for. And obviously, from a management perspective, you're looking for SSH, Telnet, FTP, SFTP, those services as well. SSH is great to try credentials that you've enumerated. Telnet for older equipment that you might be able to access, getting into switches or into routers. That way through the management plane is also super helpful. But all of these techniques help you move around a network. Networks aren't as uniform or what's the word I'm looking for? They're not as connected as they used to be. There's a lot of segmentation. Usually we just had this big monolithic network where you would plug everything into so that everything could reach it. But now we have layers. We have 3 tiers for web applications. We have layers between end user compute. Sometimes end user compute laptops and workstations can't talk to each other, even on the same wireless network, which is a good way to segment, doing the micro segmentation as well. So looking for these services and seeing what you can find to pivot and move is an important part of it. And again, the finding those next stepping stones to the more sensitive parts of the organization and the network is important. The tools we might be using, so these are coming up time and time again. So I think we've talked about some of these things, most of these, S-Shuttle not so much, proxy chains. So lol bins, this is the living off the land binaries. So this is really just techniques about using what's at hand in the environment, and being able to utilize the services that are and binaries that are there. And often this is talking about PowerShell. This is talking about NetSH as well with that kind of proxy tool. But we've covered quite a few of these tools because they are Swiss Army knives for this lateral movement. It's not just about getting a foothold. It's about making use of that foothold and moving to the next system. So we won't go through all of them, but the Covenant, as well as being a lateral movement tool for the CNC framework, command and control framework, crack map exec as well. We've been talking about that quite a number of weeks. That Swiss Army knife for Windows Active Directory hacking. Impacket for similar Active Directory hacking. Netcat we've been talking about because of the cat picture, but that's the Swiss Army knife for network communication between two devices and opening up ports and running a network port that can transfer data and data in the form of messages and files and shells, a remote shell like remote access and command line access. And then also S-Shuttle, proxy chains, and PSExec. PSExec, I have seen surface, and if you look at the Vault Typhoon stuff, and I think even the Medibank report on the incident they had, I just hear PSExec coming up time and time again, and I've actually witnessed ransomware gangs in an environment using PSExec, and that being the reason why they got caught as well. So it is something that it is good for a pen tester to use, because that should be something that raises flags. I know PSExec is a well-known and utilized tool in the Windows sysadmin space, but if you can get your organization not to use it and to use the standard tools for Windows administration, I know, it used to be the PS Tools bunch from Mark Rosanovich, but he went into Microsoft, so it is a Microsoft tool officially, but really it's not necessary to use. It is convenient, but it also is heavily used by the attackers as well. All right. Now let's talk about WMI and WRM. So this is a couple of snippets of code that you can use. They're VB scripts, and basically hang on, it looks like I'm just chopping up a bit. Basically, the message here is that WMI and WRM are facilities that have been created by Microsoft to make the configuration and monitoring of vast amounts of Windows boxes easy and automated, right? So it's Windows management interface. So they're trying to standardize on that web-based enterprise management I would say facility, like that global standard, to make it compatible with that web-based enterprise management, to actually allow administrators to change the configuration on hundreds and if not thousands of devices very quickly. So basically orchestration of settings. You can gather computer status, you can set up configuration, you can run applications, you can run code with Windows Management Interface. And this little bit of code up on the top right-hand corner with the green writing is actually going into the Fabricam domain, which is that test domain, and changing the password on everything in an organizational unit. And you can see how that would be helpful for an attacker who manages to get some level of administration to be able to quickly cause some major damage. This one down here, the Windows Remote Management one with the red type, was just a way to get service information from the print spooler. And it pumps out all the details about services, and is a standard way of figuring things out, getting an XML back about what that service does. But here too, you can monitor, configure hosts, turn off firewalls, turn on, create accounts, reset change passwords, cause some real damage in a very short span of time. And you can understand why attackers would be interested in these sorts of facilities. You can also do these WMI and WRM facilities and commands through PowerShell. You can do them through batch file. You can do them all sorts of different ways. And being able to use the utilities at hand is a great way for the pen tester to show that maybe even the EDR won't pick this stuff up. Maybe it does kind of pick up a lot of behavior and a lot of unusual commands and start to flag them. But sometimes you need eyes on glass, someone who understands what an attack is, to really recognize that these commands are actually being used in a malicious way. Pretty difficult to do that in an automated fashion at this stage. So it is it's this principle that Windows has been built to be easy to administrate. Administer, and we see that with Active Directory. And I know this is kind of turning into the Active Directory penetration test, but I implore everyone to really look at their own Active Directory and understand the security of it, because this is the pathway that is being used time and time again by the attackers. And if you are going to get a pen test done, or you're going to perform a penetration test, there is a lot of need for people to understand the Active Directory security capability and the weaknesses that Active Directory kind of accumulates over time. On the flip side, as an attacker, you don't want someone to really button down their Active Directory. When you're in there, you kind of see Active Directory as the pen tester as one big computing system. So every member of that Active Directory is part of that one big computer system. So if you find a chink in the armor, you find that weak Active Directory member computer, and you are able to get into that and use that as a foothold to get further into the Active Directory, you can use all of these tools with the right level of permissions to create havoc and chaos. So being able to demonstrate as the pen tester is really very powerful message to the target. And I'll just say that it's not the only tools and utilities that the attackers will make use of. I've heard of SCCM being used to deliver malware, so actually and ransomware, so actually having their own management tools being used to distribute malware out to the endpoints and the servers in an automated fashion. It's a little a bit I wouldn't say embarrassing, but maybe humiliating for an environment to have its own management, the own thing that's supposed to make things easier, actually used against them. And that's kind of the principle I'm trying to get along here, is that when things are really easy, you've got to also take care that it's done in a secure way as well. All right, so that's WMI and WinRM, really important facilities within Windows and for the pen tester to understand and to use for that kind of living off the land, pivoting and lateral movement. On to the next one. So you are now you own the environment, you've got the Active Directory, that's the pen tester, you're like, oh, I've got so much material to put in my report, I'm just going to nail this. The last thing you really want to do is to understand where the crown jewels are, be able to download that, or I guess demonstrate that it's possible, because you've got to be careful here. If you download bulk personal information, then you may be violating your terms of service, or you should be calling someone to validate that you should be doing that. Dumping those databases, put everything in there. I know of there was a recruitment company that had an automated portal for loading up CVs. There was an attacker that was able to actually get malware to run with the automated process of reviewing the CVs as they came in. It actually compromised the server that was running that program to analyze CVs and categorize them and put them into some sort of structure for someone else to analyze them. And they were able to download bulk information from databases to a location that they could exfiltrate. And that's the staging part of it, because just getting the data down onto a disk, and I've analyzed and done a forensic investigation on a compromised server that was compromised by an automated script. So it was like when there was some customer management system vulnerabilities that became it was, I think, a Sugar CRM customer relationship management system. There was some big vulnerabilities in that. And what happened was some attacker put together an automated script to try and get as many compromised devices across the network as they could and run Monero mining on them, and then be able to make some money out of that. But what happens for the person who's, or the organization that's been subject to this attack, is that their server that was running that CRM was actually compromised. So now they have to understand what the extent of the attack was. Was that the only attacker? Was there anything that was done? But one of the things you're looking for in that sort of forensic investigation is a database dump. How big is the database? If they're about to extract that data, what would it look like? Would it look like an SQL file? Would it be zipped up? And this is what the attacker's thinking about. They're thinking about, I've got all this data. It might be gigabytes, might be terabytes. Where do I put it? Are there tools in that place to zip it up? And how do I actually then get it out? And we'll talk about that in a little while. Also on the credential dumping as well, if you're getting lots of root access, then you are trying to get the credentials that you can off that server as well. I just had a few things happen with Zoom there, just making sure that I am clear and visible to everyone. If you give me a yes.
Yes, you are loud and clear
Okay,
and
good.
visible.
Just saw a little bit of a hiccup. I hope there wasn't any disruption. Okay. And then I don't want to be talking into space, you see. I just want to make sure. Yep, thank you, everyone. Just make sure that I am still online and you're all hearing me. I don't want you to get bored more than my voice. I'm expecting that my voice is less boring than just silence. But anyway. So then we're getting network and server config details. This is kind of after the fact, when the attacker's in there or the pen tester's in there. They want to gather all this information. That information is quite powerful, because if you're able to put together a topology of someone's network and show all their server config details, and then how the network is structured, and have everything laid out to show them what an attacker could do to bring their systems down, or to extract information, then that is very compelling. It's very compelling for the customer, and is great for the report. But that's a part of this pen test. Just getting to the perimeter is great. Getting into a DMZ or a intermediary network is excellent. Getting all the way into the corporate network and into the Active Directory is awesome. But actually being able to figure out if that data can be pulled down, staged, and exfiltrated is also very helpful for the organization, because then they can model how that happened and how they can identify that happening in the future. Sometimes we get all caught up in very specific rule sets, but what we really want to do is understand that full attack path from outside in, across the network, and then being able to and figure out how someone would make use of data exfiltration. You want to be able to identify that and be able to model that as a defender of a network, and someone who's doing that as a pen test will be able to help you do that. Ooh, okay. I want to explain this picture here. It took me a while to figure out a picture for data exfiltration, but I thought a whole lot of water going down a sinkhole kind of makes me feel like that's the data coming out of the database. Sometimes my pictures do make sense. I like this one because there is this section in the CompTIA about hiding data, and I feel like this llama is hiding. He's got a covert channel. He's watching things happen, but he's hiding in the system. There is always in cybersecurity literature the use of we bring out steganography with some tools like StegHide UI and OpenStego. I think it's because cybersecurity people find it like a cool concept. But I in all my years, I don't think I've ever seen it used in anger by an attacker, because it just does, it serves not much of a purpose. Maybe for exfiltrating, if you're trying to keep it really quiet, or you're an inside attacker trying like a insider threat, trying to get data out. But really, it's just a cool thing to know that you or to know about, so you can talk about it at barbecues if you're that kind of a person. But steganography is just about hiding data in normal files, classically in image files, so you can put in data through the file without changing the appearance of the file, send it to someone, they can use one of these tools to undo it as well. So you can kind of make it, if you want to pass messages across the internet without anyone being able to read them, because it just looks like you're sharing kind of weekend happy snaps, then this is a way to do it. But and I'd be very interested if anyone's seen an actual hacker or attack use that. But yeah, interesting stuff. Covert channels. So these three may not seem like interesting protocols because you use them for everything, right? So DNS, integral to all of our traffic on the internet. ICMP is that low-level protocol that is used to make sure that the traffic is going to the right place and quenched and is you can ping things, but it's used for a lot of network traffic, I guess, maintenance and monitoring. And then HTTPS is almost used for everything these days. So what these things are, I'm missing a T there, but these things are useful as covert channels because they can hide in plain sight. So much like using the living off the land techniques, if you have a pathway out on DNS, and I've know people who have set up kind of DNS proxies and DNS tunneling. You can actually tunnel through DNS, and it could be a good way to exfiltrate data because no one's really watching volumes of DNS. They're not watching, all of a sudden there's a gig of DNS going through. So that could be a good thing to do. ICMP is sometimes allowed in and out of an environment. So that too can be padded and used for tunneling as well, and used for transferring data if you've got something on both sides. Now, that's getting pretty fancy with DNS and ICMP. You do need to use some pretty cool equipment for that. It's not hard to use HTTPS. HTTPS can go to Dropbox. It can go to, if you actually exfiltrate data through OneDrive, just set up a OneDrive account or a M365 account as the attacker or as the pen tester. It's probably, or to Google Drive, it's probably not going to come up on the radar if someone starts sending a whole lot of data to OneDrive, because you're using that most likely as your business tool. So hiding this stuff in just plain sight is sometimes the easiest way to get data out of there. And also, so that's kind of the covert channels, but the cloud services can be used for all of this as well. I just think using OneDrive for this is the next stage for the attackers, because they can set something up as soon as it lands in OneDrive or on the Microsoft services, they can punch it out somewhere else and it's not going to be seen. So really very diabolical kind of exfiltration. There's other cloud services. You can do it through email. You can upload big files these days into to Gmail and to whatever other free mail you want to use. Also virtual, so that drive mapping as well. So sometimes you can, if you're on a device, you can mount an NFS drive or mount an SMB drive and start transferring that as well. Some networks allow you to SMB out. So if you're on a system that, and some of these attacks, some of these credential theft attacks have occurred that way. I've seen a compromise where someone was targeted through Outlook with one of those SMB URLs, and when they clicked on that SMB URL, it actually sent their hash out the network to a SMB on the internet, an SMB share on the internet. So they just collected the hash that way. They were able to crack the hash, understand the credential, the username and password. They then had to get in via the VPN that didn't have MFA on. So that was the way they actually managed to get into that. But if there's SMB out allowed, then that virtual drive mapping could happen too, and you can use that same pathway for transferring data out. I would hope that people are watching for SMB data out, but it's a little bit strange, or SMB attempts out. The SMB is that Windows networking. to try and get data out there. Other ones, Pastebin is diabolical. People dump all sorts of things in Pastebin. It's not great. ScribD, I've seen that not so recently as well. People putting sensitive details into ScribD just to be able to share them with people in an easy way. So those sorts of services can also be used for smaller amounts of information. And then there's this Covert channel. We've got this, we have security literature talking about alternate data streams in NTFS2. This really should be in the kind of the covert channels part, or a way to hide data in an environment. Usually when an attacker is in an environment, they're not trying to hide data, they're trying to get it out as fast as they can to be able to kind of monetize it. So actually hiding data streams is probably more of an insider threat thing. And what data streams are in NTFS is there's a main data stream for a file. Let's say it's called shopping list.txt in Notepad. In NTFS, there's a way of loading that shopping list.txt, not just with the data that makes up the shopping list, the text of the shopping list, but also to fill it with data from something else as well, and transfer that around and hide it in that file. So there's this whole other way you can use the file system to hide information. Not super helpful. Good to know it's there. If you're doing forensic investigation, it is something you look for, alternate data streams, but not typically used, maybe by malware if they're doing something funny. Yeah. Now, I think I had questions. So I'm going to stop Jack for a little bit for questions. I'll just have a look in the Q&A.
Yes, there are quite a number of questions that are about the exam, which I'll get you to save until the end of the session. But feel free to jump into any that appeal to you. Otherwise,
yeah. Oh, Vijay, yes, this course is for you. Restart your career, definitely in cybersecurity. This is a great introduction to the technical elements of pen testing. So I think that doing these sorts of courses just gives you a taste for what is involved in getting some certifications. This gives you a nice, broad and not too deep view of all of the concepts and terminology in the CompTIA PenTest Plus. I would recommend once you've done this, you would go and study some quizzes and then go sit the actual exam for PenTest Plus, and then start to do the research things that you need. So it is difficult from ground zero, but a hunger and a thirst for it is what you've got to find. That internal motivation to enjoy the challenge of breaking into something or going around security controls is what you really need to find. But I highly encourage you. The IT industry, the cybersecurity industry needs good resources, good people to do good work and protect organizations. So yes, this is a good course for you. So keep at it and go back to the other ones. Mark is saying, do pen testers write their own browser extensions or other malicious types of package? That would be a specialization, I'd imagine. I don't think that browser extension coding is that difficult, in the range of coding that you could do. I think it's kind of fairly simple from what I remember of doing a little bit or looking into that a little bit. But it would be a very good pen testing utility to be able to facilitate an extension into a browser to show that could be done. A malicious extension, being able to host it somewhere and download and install it. So yeah, some of them I bet they do, Marcus. Time stopping. Yeah. So Sean, we haven't talked about that much, but it is covering your tracks. Hang on, have I gone too far on my slide as well? I'm just going to go back up. There we are. So it would be in this sort of a slide where it doesn't actually feature in the CompTIA PenTest Plus, but time stomping is the ability to change the timestamp on a file. Those timestamps are really crucial when you're doing a forensic investigation or trying to figure out the timeline for an attack on a server or workstation to see when they created artifacts, and when things started to happen. So it is a great thing to have and understand as a pen tester. If you're able to muck up a forensic investigation, you're kind of showing that the forensic investigation is a little bit maybe underwhelming or inadequate, but also showing that, you know, the tools that you used should be monitored as well. So a lot of this stuff is about making sure that the activity you see in a pen test is actually going to get caught by the right people and understood. So yeah, time stopping, good to try, bring it to the attention of the defenders. Stephen Chan, TeamViewer, the quick support agent is the quick support agent. You mean quick assist agent, Stephen, I think, to having an endpoint compared to the full installation TeamViewer. So I think that quick assist is just as problematic as TeamViewer, or AnyDesk or Level. These have all been used by the attackers. The problem is that quick assist only requires a Microsoft account to connect to a target. So you can call up someone and say, hey, I hear you're having a problem. Can I help you? Please put this code in Quick Assist. And as soon as they put that code in Quick Assist, that you are provided from your own Quick Assist, then you are controlling their computer. That is a really big problem. So particularly if they've got local admin, you say, can I take control? You take control and you do things, and you can run up browser extensions, run up kind of create accounts. You can run ransomware basically through that facility. So that quick support or quick assist, Stephen, is I would say is a good thing to block. Just in the last year, it's become quite popular for some of the Russian actors. So that's a great question. A good thing to try. And we talked a little bit about this with the social engineering, but actually impersonating the help desk and being able to try and provide access that way, or provide assistance and get someone to give you their username and password, can be quite hard. But actually getting someone to run up a tool to say, I'm going to remote control your system, is actually not too difficult either. I would look at some of the advisories put out around Curly Spider. They've been known to use that sort of technique as well. Leanne, would hiding QR codes in an image to be sent to a mobile phone when it would be automatically scanned and then link open count as steganography, or is this specifically for exfiltrating and not infiltrating? So I think that would be more like phishing, because you're trying to hide a URL in something to have it triggered. So you're actually kind of social engineering a bit to get someone to accidentally click on the QR code and go somewhere, maybe put in their credentials or something like that. Not so much steganography. Steganography wouldn't have any difference to the image, to a camera or anything else. I reckon it'd be pretty hard to hide something in an image, a QR code in an image. But this is more about, steganography is more about hiding the data in the encoding, like in the JPEG code or the PNG code. So rearranging it so it can be deciphered from a tool. So you use a tool to inject it and use a tool to basically decrypt it or inject and extract the code out of it. So yeah, so that's quite different, Leanne, but kind of a cool idea to hide QR codes and hope that someone's going to be able to select it and browse to it. Jonathan Brandis, just last one here. Got one for you, Jeremy. Using any reporting tools modern day? Using any reporting tools modern day. So I think you're asking any tools to report on the pen test, so to collect it all together. I think the documentation, we talked a little bit about that, but putting it into something you're familiar with. Cherry Tree is very familiar with Linux users. Someone I respect very much uses Cherry Tree for a lot of things. Putting things into SharePoint, being able to document all that is important. And also making sure that you've got a good template for a pen test report is important as well. I don't think there's really great ways of automating the population of a pen test report. I think it needs a human touch to be able to drive a a flow out of the documentation. And let's go into that. It's a good. I'll answer some of the other ones later. But that's a good segue into the cleanup, restoration, and documentation. So when you are doing the pen test, you really do need to keep a log of what you have done and how you've done it. Because when you come to withdrawing out of the environment, if you've been successful in breaking into it, you're going to have to remove all of the artifacts and persistence mechanisms that you've put in place into the environment in the first place, because you don't want them there for the attacker to use next time. And I know that sounds very obvious, but if you are trying thing after thing, and this is often how pen testing works, you try 3 things and you try 4 things and you go back and try a variation of those first 3 things, and you change a setting and you try 5 other things. You're moving around a lot. You're creating a lot of kind of history of changes of files and artifacts. Having a structured approach to that is really important, because you need to be able to go back and make sure you are not opening up a gap or a weakness in that device to be later used by an attacker. So you've got to keep that good documentation. You've got to know where you're at. You've got to be able to undo the things that you've done, revert those configuration changes, remove the credentials you've made. I guarantee you, when you're putting in that credential, you'll think, oh, remember I did that. But if you've on to day 6, going back and figuring out what you did during that whole thing is not going to stay in your mind. You're going to need to refer to a log to figure out how to undo it. So that's a really important skill for a pen tester to have, because you don't want to have that on your hands, that you open the door for the next attacker to come in and left the tools, the configuration, the credentials there able for them to use. Also, removing tools. Also, if you are that pen tester that's managed to own the virtual machine environment or own a device enough, you don't have to also own a virtual machine, a virtual host environment. You could also jump onto a normal machine and run up VirtualBox or another hypervisor and download it if you're able to do that, and run other systems in there as well. So if you've done that, you've got to get rid of those virtual machines. You've got to spin them down and make sure that they are eradicated as well. You also want to preserve artifacts, and the artifacts are the evidence that you have done what you say you have done, because you need to put this into a report that enables the recipient of the report to be able to replicate what you have done. And that is really important, because, and I'll touch on this a few times, but if you provide a report that says, I have broken into your PHP application with a PHP script of my own making, and you need to fix it, right? So that's in your report, and you haven't provided too much detail. The first thing I would be asking of my team who received this report is to say, hey, have a look at that. They broke into the PHP application. How did they do it? How was that possible? And they are saying we need to patch it to fix it. If we patch it, how are we going to validate that it's fixed it without attempting the replication again? So I would want my team, my technical specialists, to go and try that, try and break that application, and then be able to say, yes, we got into it this way, and be successful in that. And if they weren't, go back to the pen test, say, hey, how did that happen? We can't replicate it. And then when they come to fixing it, they can actually then go back and try and replicate it again and validate that it is actually fixed and no longer a risk. This is crucial stuff for closing things down. Sometimes things end up in a pen test report that are very crucial and don't get fixed because there's not enough details around how to replicate, how to fix it. People think they've patched it, and actually maybe they haven't. They've got to try it and validate it. And the best way to validate it is retesting. So make sure you preserve those artifacts so you can actually put it into your pen test report as a full pen test and useful pen test report. And then also, there may be an agreement to destroy customer data that you've obtained. You would obviously be telling them what you've obtained. It may be still on their environment. It may still be on, or you may have taken it over onto your environment, which would be unusual. But if you've done that staging and you've demonstrated that you've taken the screenshots, you've shown what you've done, then you really should destroy that customer data and destroy it in a way that it can't be restored in that way. So you've got to think about the backup routines as well. In that case, if you're keeping that data there for a couple of days, it might actually end up in backups where the customer doesn't want it either. So it's really important that we think about these things during a pen test so we don't actually muck up, spoil, or taint the customer data, customer network too much. So really very important. All right, here we go. On to the next one. I love this vacuum cleaner, by the way. It's not as easy as this. If it was this easy to clean up just by vacuuming up confetti, because you can see it clearly, it's a little bit more challenging to clean up after a pen test. So that documentation and the log of what you've done is really very important. Now, on to the I've talked a little bit about this, but that log should include screenshots. It should include recordings. It doesn't have to include recordings, but recordings are really very helpful. If you're recording your sessions while you're attacking, then you can go back through it and catalog what you've done as well. So it is great to have as much of this recorded as possible. Getting those tool notes, like notes of what commands you've run, the logs, getting the bash commands out as well is very helpful. The bash history. So in a Unix box, when you're writing commands, they typically end up in the bash history. Taking that out, putting into your documentation to make sure that you've got everything that was run. And those testing notes, like I was saying, into Cherry Tree, Confluence, Wiki, SharePoint, put it somewhere. If you've got multiple pen testers running, you need some way to structure all of that information so that it can be used in a report and you get it in a nice, clean presentation and be able to do it in a professional manner. So really very important to have that documentation. Also, the final pen test report is going to give you that idea of method and findings, right? So you need to capture in that report, one, your pen test was what the customer expected. Have you covered the scope? Have you covered the statement of work? Have you actually done a thorough job? And you tell them that by your method. And it might just be an overview of the stages that were conducted: enumeration, vulnerability scanning, exploitation, exfiltration, those kind of big kind of chunks of phases. So understanding the method, having the method in that report will build confidence with your report that you've done a good job, because sometimes, lo and behold, there are not many findings, right? You can spend a week on an environment that's only got one website and they've locked it down, and there is only one thing to look at. You do your open source intelligence. They're a small organization. There's not a lot to put in the pen test report. So you've got to make sure your method is significant enough so that they know that they've got something for their money. Then obviously the findings are the thing that will be of value to the end user, to the recipient, where the problems were, the gaps are, and you're always putting them in a prioritized approach. And this report is basically just a communication tool. It is also a record of what you've done and what has been completed, so that, for compliance purposes as well, and accountability for the teams that were doing it and that were running this pen test. But it is just a communication tool. You're trying to convey to your customer how to make their environment better, how to make it more secure against attack. This is what it is. It's a communication tool, and the better that conveys that message, the more that the customer is going to get out of it. So very important to remember that we don't just do the pen test report for fun. We put the pen test report together to convey a message. Really very important. And then in there you have the tactical and strategic improvement. So you plug the gaps before the bad guys find them. That is definitions of success for a security guy. You find the problems before they become a problem for you. That compliance and accountability is important. Baseline for security posture as well. So sometimes a pen test can be like, we've looked at all your whole environment. These are the areas you need to fix up, and that brings up the baseline. You can say that if you fall below that, you've got to bring it up again, and gives you that idea of progress a long time. So you can show that, oh, 3 years ago we had this problem, and it's great to go back into pen test reports. I know everyone does, I'm sure, like going back into incident reports. It's amazing how much you forget about what has been done in a pen test when you reflect back on it, when you actually open up the old pen test report and have a look at it. But it could show you, and you can do this for your organization, how your findings are actually reducing over time and how the gaps are reducing over time. Very compelling stuff to say this cybersecurity team is actually doing a good job and reducing the risk to the organization. So often when nothing happens in cybersecurity, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If nothing happens, they're like, why do we need cybersecurity? But if things keep on happening in cybersecurity, they think, what's cybersecurity doing? So it's a bit of a tough thing. But if you can show over time that you are improving the organization with the data out of pen test reports, then that is very helpful as well, and can show benefit to the organization. Now, thinking hard about considerations for the report, like the thinking man here. When you're putting the report together, you do have to think about legal considerations. You should have been thinking about this during the pen test, but if you are a large organization doing a pen test for a large organization, then you probably want to get lawyers to have a look at things that you found, to make sure you got the correct authorization and consent, and you stayed aligned to scope, and also that you had that you are adequately covering the compliance requirements for the organization, and then also liability. So if something goes wrong after that or during the pen test, to make sure that that is captured in the report as well, that these things did happen, so that there is no kind of recourse afterwards, or you're being upfront about everything in the report. So legal considerations are important. Ethical considerations are based around holding sensitive information, a lot around privacy and things like that, but also thinking about OT environments or hospital environments where you might have an impact on individuals. So having those, understanding the ethical considerations of your report and your pen testing is important for your organization. And then finally, quality control. And I've said this, I think, in this course before, but it's important when you put together your report, you actually walk away from it for a little while, clear your head and come back and look at it with fresh eyes, get it peer reviewed, make sure it's technically accurate. Nothing worse than a pen test report that is misleading or technically inaccurate. Technically inaccurate will erode confidence in the report from head to foot, and it's got to be professionally formatted. And a lot of people discount this, but you don't really trust a report that is not clearly and professionally formatted. So it is an important thing. Okay. That's right, Tim. 50 years ago, definitely. Almost 30 years ago too. I think that's just when cybersecurity or information security or information assurance is really getting up and going. Okay, let's get on. We're almost there. The sections in the report, you want an executive summary. What's funny is a lot of people write executive reports. Sorry, they write executive summaries as introductions. They're very different. The executive summary really should be a summary of the document that an executive can read and understand the key findings, or maybe the method, the key findings, and the recommendations in dot point, no more than 3 for each, in a nice contained, read it in 2 minutes kind of paragraph, but structured in a way that really reflects the entire report. An introduction is really just setting the scene for the pen test. It was done for this reason, commissioned by this person. It is covering off these environments, a little bit about scope maybe, but it is the lead into the rest of it, right? So executive summary, different to introduction. It's a bit of a nuance, but important that your executive summary doesn't read like an introduction, because the executive will go, well, this tells me nothing about what I need to be worried about. And really what's in the executive's mind is, do I have to spend money? What do I have to do first? Is this going to hurt me? That sort of thing. And how bad is it? So they want to know that pretty quickly. So a summary of that is what the executive summary is. The methodology is that is what we've been talking about. The evidence, not the evidence, but the process you went through for pen testing. Maybe something about tools, but really those big categories and phases of pen testing. The detailed findings is the findings, the gaps that we found and what was attacked, always in a prioritized list or an order of severity. The attack narrative is something that CompTIA has put in here, but this is a good little piece where you can say if someone using these vulnerabilities is able to do this, and I would call that threat scenarios, but an attack narrative that actually chains all of those weaknesses into threat scenario after threat scenario is a nice way to present the information in a way that is compelling to a person who is not technical. Recommendations and remediations, both short-term and long-term. And I don't typically put this in, but you can put a conclusion in to say, and that's the end, we did this, and kind of summarize that a little bit and put a conclusion in. I'd say it's not really needed. The appendix is really important because often we put in an appendix a contact list of who on both sides, the pen testing side and the customer side, is actually involved in the pen test. But also in the appendix, we are trying to provide all that evidence. It's no good putting all of the evidence of pen testing in the methodology, because methodology just blows out. So putting it in the appendix and referring to the appendix from the methodology is the best way to do that. So you have the attacks and the technical details, because they can be sometimes pages long, of the weakness and the attack of that weakness or the exploitation of that weakness in the appendix with all of its screenshots, so that the people who are reading it, the middle manager would just read it and go, oh, I believe that. But the technical person goes, oh, I really want to be able to replicate that. They jump down to the appendix to figure out how they can do that. So that's the structure of the report. And they're the major sections. Key points and suggestions from me for the report must flow and be easy to navigate. You should be able to get someone to bounce through the sections to be able to follow a particular vulnerability or a finding through the recommendations and be able to move through the document without having to read it from top to bottom. They should be able to jump around to what they're interested in, so they can pick and choose what they're reading. Make sure there's that technical detail to verify weaknesses. I've covered that, and to replicate what they've done. And remember, your audience is the executive view, the middle management view, and the technologist view. And I'm not saying all of these audience categories play golf, but I'm saying that if you want to hit it out of the park or hit a hole in one with your report, you've got to write it for all these three levels: the executives, the middle management, and the technologists, so that all of them trust and believe and actually use the report to better their environment. Risk scoring is important, so that business context around what will be the bad thing that will happen if they don't fix these things up is crucial. Being able to speak risk, likelihood, and impact is very key. This is a very basic matrix, but you should really, when you have your findings and the exploitation of the impact and likelihood of that particular finding being exploited, will drive a risk determination or a risk rating. You always pick the highest risk stuff up the top and cascade it down. There's no real reason to do it in any other order. By category, it doesn't really work. People are really interested in what they need to do first. So you put the high severity stuff at the top. And then when you go down to the recommendations, you put the high, educates the prioritization. So that's how that's done. So you put the high priority stuff at the top, and you must take a balanced view. Not everything is high. Not everything is low. You must have a range of things in there. And if you don't have any highs, and it's important when you put in your risk matrix that you actually describe what you believe is high, constitutes a high. So describing that high would cause a system to come down, or the complete compromise of a system, a list of things that you call high. Because when you come into an environment from outside, you might have your risk scoring, but they certainly have their own enterprise risk management, and their high may be very different to your high risk. So just be aware of that as well coming into an organization. Now, I think this is almost it, but the technical controls are the recommendations that we have. These are some key ones. It's important that the pen tester knows not only how to break into things, but also how to fix things. Passwords, patching, and antivirus were kind of like, over the last 10 years, the three horsemen of the apocalypse. So you fix up your access control with passwords, you fix up your patching, you put in some good EDR, the endpoint detection and response. It's kind of moved on from there. But those three things are kind of featured in most of the pen test reports that I've seen in the last 10 years. So, but these days, it's a little bit further. Patching, MFA, well, it's still passwords, really. It's just stronger passwords. Input sanitization or web application security, we call that one out because it's caused so much problems in the past. Encryption, yeah, encryption's good. Encryption over the network is great. Encryption of files is great. Sometimes think that encryption in place is not very helpful, but it creates a perception that things are secure. And then password management, network segmentation is very important in an organization, an organization's network, and endpoint detection response. These are things that will most likely find their way as strategic and tactical recommendations in a pen test report. So these are the technical controls, administrative controls that we have, policies and procedures. The access control policy will talk about roles-based access control, least privilege, segregation of duties. You'll find these recommendations coming into the pen test report, because you can't just always rely on technical controls. You need people to do their bit as well. So that training awareness, that education, that early detection of security issues is important to include that in the recommendations if it is going to help a weakness and maybe a systemic weakness as well. And the final one here, I love this cockatoo, is the physical controls. Cockatoos are diabolical. I think that's actually not a cockatoo, maybe a cockerel. I'm not sure. A cockereel? No. Yeah, cockerel, I think. Anyway.
That's actually a galah, sorry.
That's a galah?
I believe that is, it's not a sulfur-crested cockatoo. I'm so sorry. I'm a bird guy. It's not a sulfur-crested cockatoo. It may be a different kind of cockatoo, but to me, it looks like a galah due to the tinge of pink on its head. Yeah, you're welcome, everybody.
Everyone's having a go. Flaming galah. That's right. Good old Alf. All right. But anyway, physical controls need to be around reception. Often we've had network points for convenience, but being able to plug into something like that to get straight into the corporate network is not great. We need our people to watch what happens in reception, because that is where our trusted zone intermingles with our untrusted zone. Those lobbies is the same thing. Access passes. Some of these things will come up in a pen test because you are using the physical inadequacies to get access. And sometimes you need a fence to keep these galahs out of your environment. Biometrics, man traps, video surveillance, and having that going to somewhere sensible, not just recording, but having someone actually watching that is important as well. But physical controls are still a very important part of the cybersecurity story, because you get past those, then you can load all sorts of things up into an environment as well. And I think that is my last one. So I'll just do have I got some time, Jack, for a few more questions? Just 2 or 3?
Well, we technically are 4 minutes over time, but I'm feeling really positive that there's bird chat happening. So I'm going to allow you 2 questions and 1 clarification for exam reasons. So shall we start with the exam clarification, just because we had a few people requesting a little bit more detail of the VMware, the practical element of the exam.
Yeah, sure. So the virtual machine that you'll be breaking into that is being created for this course is built in VirtualBox. So it is an OVA that you can install in. So it can run in VMware Player, but in the past that has been a little bit difficult for some people with the network services. So because you won't have access to log in to this box, you'll have to run up a Kali box next to it and try and break into it that way. I would recommend using VirtualBox, even if you do have VMware Player installed. You can uninstall it after this, no problems. VirtualBox will give you less problems from the outset because it will be in that. It's free. It's really easy. I know, you know, it's sometimes not nice using big corporates software, but VirtualBox has been the mainstay for this sort of thing for a while. Yeah, that is the that is why we've chosen that, just because it's the easiest path. So yeah, use that. Yeah. The VM practical element. So it'll be a Linux box. It'll boot up in VirtualBox. It is a current. I'll provide a walkthrough as well. So there'll be a link to that in the box. In the exam details. So it is you will be able to step through it, but parts of the VMware are changed. The VirtualBox is changed from the walkthrough. I am using an image from VulnHub, but it'll be one that is tailored for this, that has been tailored for this class. So it is, you can't use the whole walkthrough for it, but you can use the tools and get your own provide your own pathway to getting to where it is. So that's the VM practical element. And I'll answer Ron's. When you first started out, was there anything that was missed post pen testing environment? There's always stuff that is missed, and usually it comes down to configuration or a vulnerability in software that maybe hasn't been detected yet, or there isn't a module for. So those sorts of things do get missed. But yes, it is not a perfect process. Even the best pen tester will miss things because they can't know everything. But sometimes there's also not a way into a network as well, and that the pen test proves that. Proves that to the best of someone's ability that is not the case. So there are things that do that do get missed. Alan, is pen test report considered a legal document for a record of your activities? It could be, depending on the legal privilege or the environment that you may need to have some sort of protection because of the sensitivity. But typically, not so much a legal document. Might become a legal document if there's a kind of a problem afterwards. But yeah, it really depends on the circumstance. And I'll answer the last one, Peter Aja. Good to see you in here again, Peter. Nice to see you. A minute to reflect on Medibank breach. I would just say from that is I would say MFA for that. MFA, and also logging and monitoring and SOC. You know, no one gets this stuff right, and you can't throw stones from a different organization at an organization for what has happened. I think I have a great deal of sympathy for those who have gone through an incident. So I think that you can do everything right and still be subject to a breach. And I think it is a hard thing to do good cybersecurity in a large organization. So no judgment on anyone, except that that always MFA and pen testing is the key here, making sure that your controls are adequate. Yeah, and I think that's probably it.
That is it. I was about to say that I'm sorry, but I'm not going to allow any more questions to be answered because we're over time. We've still seem to have fairly high engagement. So thank you everyone for sticking with us and bearing with us and Jeremy's boundless enthusiasm, as well as some of the fantastic level of questions. Thank thank you very much, Jeremy, for this short course. And thanks very much, as I said, to all of the participants. As always, all of the course materials, so that's the recordings, the written materials, links, etc., will be available via the student learning portal. That's learn.itmasters.edu.au. If you missed one of the weeks or all of the prior weeks, you can find all of the previous week's material, as well as this week's, will be uploaded within 24 hours. The exam, as I said earlier, you get one attempt per student or per email address to complete. You've got 60 minutes in which to answer 20 multiple choice questions, and there will be a practical VMware element as well as that exam. After you complete that, if you pass with a 50% or more mark, you should receive your certificate within a couple of business days. There does need to be some leeway given for marking of those. The exam will be available within 24 hours of this. So go forth and enjoy your discussions on the portals. Once again, you have unlimited time to complete the exam, as in if you start it tomorrow, if it's uploaded tomorrow, or if you start it in 6 months' time, that is not a problem. You can receive the certificate of completion all the same. And that can be put towards your 3 short courses, counting towards 1 subject credit in a full-length grad certificate or master's course. If you're interested in those courses, please do jump onto itmasters.edu.au and have a look at some of those availabilities, as well as, if you're an Australian resident, the CompTIA courses that you can get a discount for taking those industry certification examinations as well. Thanks, everyone, for bearing with us. I will stop rattling on now. Thanks again, Jeremy Costa, as well as Lily Nguyen, who is, as always, faithfully working away in the background, making sure everything happens. Any questions about this can be directed to shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au as well. Jeremy, did you have one last thing to sign off with?
Yeah, I've enjoyed this. It's been a fun 4 weeks. I really enjoy this interaction, and all the comments down on the right-hand side. I do keep an eye on them, and it's been especially fun seeing previous students come into here as well. So hello to those. I will also make I don't typically make my LinkedIn profile public, but I'll do that for the next week. So if anyone wants to link in or to join on LinkedIn, happy to do that as well. But just mention the IT Masters course so I know who you are. There's quite a few people who reach out over LinkedIn, but I'll leave that open for a week. So happy to do that.
Fantastic. Well, with that, thanks, everybody. As always, good night or good morning, afternoon, evening, as the case may be for you. Hope to see you back at the next round of short courses or signing up to one of our full-length courses as well. Happy pen testing, everyone, and good luck. Bye.